Welcome to the Intellectual Anarchy podcast. I'm Patrick Sullivan.
And I'm Catherine Cruz, and I'm just a curious cat. Okay, so what is culture? How does that work?
It is always kind of a mystery, right? What is culture? But it's really the way we behave and treat each other more than anything. It's kind of setting expectations and norms about what it means to do what you do and what people can expect. So, like the culture at Oceanit is also a reflection of how we started, which was in Hawaii. So the culture of Hawaii and concepts of, ohana and aloha and that kind of thing are embedded into the culture of Oceanit, which is a business culture. But it's got a Hawaiian flavor to it, which is different than an East Coast culture or even a California culture. But when you live in it, it's kind of a real thing. And for people that it's really comfortable, it works really well. And we find people from all over, when they see it, they experience it, they really like it, but it's not a common culture in business. But it's kind of what we built here organically. And I think the environment and the community informed that.
And then you start out this chapter with this quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." What does that mean?
Well, Peter Drucker was a famous business guru who consulted with so many businesses over the years. But companies create strategies and then they fail. But culture is this enduring thing that enables strategies to work, enables people to be successful, enables things to happen. So culture is that enduring way of being that enables a business to continue to grow and thrive. And an example of, Boeing kind of lost its way. It became this business culture where it was really about aircraft and excellence in building aircraft. It had a great reputation in designing and building aircraft. And as I was mentioning, being a young kid, seeing the mock-up of the 747 made of plywood, right, as they're inventing this idea of long-haul aircraft, which you could attribute back to, I was always fascinated with Howard Hughes and the Spruce Goose, right, because people said it would never get off the ground, it would never fly. But you can have these massively heavy things fly through the air. That's an incredible idea. And the 747 kind of brought that big, wide, maximum, like lots of passengers, long-distance aircraft, which at that time in history was like a big thing. Whereas today, I think Boeing has become a business about, shareholder profits and business executive bonuses and, making sure that the stock goes up so many points every year kind of thing, at the expense of the culture of what used to be about excellence in building aircraft. So culture can have a huge, profound impact on the business, but I think it's time delayed. So preserving culture is a big issue. And one of the interesting things that happened during COVID is that less people came in the office. A lot of young people, new people we hired, didn't get to rub elbows with experienced people. And so you end up with a little bit of a dust up in that because they don't quite know what's expected. Like, how do people behave? And so if they come from an environment where they expect to behave a certain way and then they come to Oceanit, if they don't actually spend time with people, they don't pick up on the culture. So you don't get culture just with remote work. I think that's one of the risks.
Well, I see that in, a lot of young people when they come in and they're not used to the face-to-face human contact. They are mainly on, social media, email, a little reluctant to pick up the phone and make that connect. But yeah, they're coming from a different
It's a
place.
huge issue. And we see that as well. I think trying to get people to understand people as humans is part of the culture of what we do at Oceanit. But the same issue with young people, thinking if they just send them an email, they're done, as opposed to call them up or sit with them. So I encourage people here all the time, like a lot of people we work with are in DC or in other parts of the world, and you just sit with them. So I just had a meeting, interesting company in Paris called Hermes. They make purses.
And scarves.
I never knew this, so I have to plead ignorance. But I really enjoyed meeting with them. They're interested in a fabric we make called Kertex, which is made of chicken feathers. But what was interesting is that the way the culture of their business, they're very focused on quality over quantity. They've been around for many, many years, but they stay focused on the fundamentals. So they keep evolving over time, but the fundamentals really come through with everybody we met with. So you get a sense that there's a culture there. And they kind of got quickly what we do at Oceanit too. So we may be able to collaborate with them because they really liked the culture of what we do here. That was the most interesting thing for them. Not so much, they liked the fabric. That was really good, and they've got a bunch of ideas. But the thing that was most interesting was the connection from a cultural standpoint, focusing on quality, innovation, and the way we work together. So it's surprising, right on the other side of the world, but there's a culture in the way they do things. And there's a culture here in the way we do things. And culture turns out to be really important and will endure over time.
It's interesting because I guess you don't think of, you think of a luxury brand like that in chicken feathers, but yeah.
Well, so they're interested in green materials, but new materials and new ways to use materials that frankly we didn't think about. I mean, I never thought about. And so we've created these fabrics because we created new manufacturing processes using waste material, but they can use them in ways we never thought about. And I thought, well, that's really cool because I learned something when I went there too, the way they look at things and the way they like to use these materials. And if you look at them over time, they were able to use different kinds of materials and ways of presenting these things and configuring them the way they're assembled to create value around their brand, the kind of quality of what they do, but also what they represent. So it's kind of weird, how that happened, but it was kind of fun.
Yeah, but it's getting back to that culture.
Right. And the culture, if it endures, I think helps companies sustain over time. If you lose the culture, the company has increased a lot of risk. And so, for example, you take Apple. So Steve Jobs created a culture, and the company grew enormously. Once he passed away, I think Cook has done a lot to keep it going. But my suspicion is that they're kind of fraying around the edges on the culture, and that's what's putting Apple at risk. Whereas they created some great innovations around the iPhone, and they've driven that thing really hard. But now you got a lot of other companies doing the same thing. So they need to kind of break through that next disruptive space. But I'm sure from a business standpoint, it's risky, right? And so being willing to take that risk becomes part of the culture. But over time, a lot of these companies just focus on the short-term returns, the Boeing example, and they lose track of the long term.
So stay focused on
the culture. Fundamentals, yeah. And so that's where culture is such an important thing. But culture can also be reflected in the way people behave, and so organization matters a lot. And in our case here, we tend to be flatter. Flatter means we empower people to think at a much lower level. I think what happens is in a command and control organization, the discipline is forced from the outside. So when you're in your cubicle, your box, you do what's in your box. Your box constrains what you're allowed to do. in an organization like Oceanit, we're empowering people to think, but it requires that they self-discipline. They focus themselves on the things they do. Not everybody is set up for that. So people don't have that kind of discipline. And they need that external force to keep them where they got to be. But what we try to do, and we've had a lot of success with here, is give people the freedom to think, but also apply their own discipline to do their job. That's how a flat organization works. I think case in point is the military. So military is very command and control. It's very horizontal or very vertical in the way it's set up. But the special forces are more horizontal. And so you empower a highly educated, a highly equipped, small force to make a decision when nobody else is there to tell it what to do. And the U.S. military has found it to be very effective with special forces. But there's just much fewer of them. And most of the military is built still around a very command and control.
Right, but do what you need to do to get the mission accomplished.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
So at Oceanit, we're much more horizontal, but it makes it difficult to manage. And so, but it also makes it very good for innovation. So you're making a trade-off. So innovation requires a certain amount of flexibility where you let people do their job, and you still have to talk about it and discuss it. They're accountable for it. But it's harder to manage because you're empowering people to do things. So you got to trust that people will do the right thing, given the right strategic principles and the ideas and thinking at a high level. But it is difficult to manage. It's easier to manage an organization where people only do what they're told to do.
Right, stay in your lane.
Exactly. And that's an organization built to manage, which is a lot of businesses. So this kind of an organization is difficult from that standpoint. But it also is how you create an innovative organization and how you deliver an innovation.
Do you give deadlines, like deliverables? Like, okay,
We do. No, and this is what makes it what I call one of the strategic principles in operations is around dynamic tension. There's a natural tension, right? Schedules, deliverables, budgets. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. If people ignore that, they create a problem. They have to manage it. If we micromanage it, which is possible, it takes the flexibility of what they do away from them, and it gives it to the manager. And the manager wants to put all square pegs in square holes, round pegs in round holes. We're trying to give people the freedom to think, but we're also trying to hold them to account.
I mean, I like deadlines, and I like to look down the road to anticipate where there might be a bottleneck.
Right. But see, some people can do that and be more self-propelled. Other people cannot. And so in this organization, we empower people, but when they can't actually manage deadlines, schedules, and deliverables, then we have to hold them to account. And that can be very unpleasant. But we're trying to give them direct feedback so that everybody knows. And the ones that can do that and learn to do that well can be very successful. And the ones that can't is a constant problem. And so we're always managing that. But we're trying to give people the freedom to think. These are almost conflicting ideas, but it turns out to do innovation, you've got to empower people. But if they can't find a way through the problem, then you have to step in. Yeah, deadlines matter, right? So people think, I'm waiting for a bolt of lightning so I can be innovative. That's not how it happens.
Yeah, like Eureka.
There's deadlines.
Yeah.
You learn to manage against deadlines. You learn to think around goals and targets. There's a discipline that you can learn to do. It isn't about getting struck by lightning. Yeah, that may happen, but that's not what we do. We have to deliver consistently, repeatably on a schedule. Everybody likes payroll every 2 weeks. It doesn't just happen in a vacuum. But for some people, that's just too hard to do. And this isn't the right place for them. I mean, there's good places for them. But what's really required here is people that can do that. And not everybody's cut out for that. But that's in fact really what it is. It's saying, I've got 10 minutes, give me 3 things and do it. And people learn to do it. And I've watched it over and over and over. But some people cannot. And it reminds me, it's not the same. I need to be careful how I say this. But there was a movie with Steve Martin called The Jerk, where he's a howly white guy in a black family. And he doesn't have any rhythm. And he can't get it. And he just, no matter what he does, he's never going to get rhythm. There's some people that are just like that. They can't learn to do this because it's just not in them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to ask them to, say, execute in this framework, it won't work. And so we want to find those people and let them know that so they can find the right place.
But it's interesting because you deal with like the military, or you deal with a luxury brand in Paris. But just some of the basic stuff that you do works.
Well, it's interesting because there's a commonality there. See, the military, the way we work with them and the reason they like us is because they're looking for disruptive innovation to solve unsolved, really intractable, difficult problems. What Hermes is interested in is creating new ideas to disrupt the fashion world, where they create something that becomes important and memorable, but may disrupt the status quo of what's being done now. And they kind of have a history of that, right? Introducing their purse, I didn't know this, but was associated with like gear for horses. There wasn't a purse market, in other words, but it became a purse, and they became a purse company through that kind of act. And they produce other things too, but what was interesting is that they produce a thing that doesn't necessarily already exist, and they're just disrupting everybody's thinking around it. And they're trying to continue to do that, even though it's like 100-something years later.
I'm just thinking, I think the chicken is the state bird, not the state bird, but the bird of France.
Yes. Well, it turns out there's a lot of chicken waste around the world, and it mostly goes into landfills. And we can turn it into a luxury fabric. Who would have figured? And so we worked on that actually as a problem on supply chains with the U.S. military, because they're looking at new supply chains for all kinds of new materials. And so this is a material that doesn't exist, so we call it Curetex. Now it's a new material, and we're trying to find the right first markets. But we're creating something that didn't exist to solve a problem that's not the same as the Hermes problem, but it's a supply chain issue. And supply chains matter, right? Especially for the military. So they're trying to have multiple ways to get something done. And an interesting example, I was listening to, I think it was an Army general talk about one of the challenges is they don't have access to enough trousers. It's a supply chain problem.
Really? Not enough pants.
Pants. And I think it was the Army. They're trying to have pants made in the U.S. There are fewer suppliers, and the supply chain is not being able to keep up. So there's a shortage of pants because they got to be very specific pants. You can't just have any pants. You got to be very specific military pants, very specific color. But the point is, it's a supply chain, right? And it sounds silly, but now think about that problem if there's a military conflict, if there's some other thing going on. You need different ways to get your pants. If you can't get your pants, you can't do your job.
Right. Yeah.
That's a problem. So that's why they're looking at new materials.
It could get in the way of fulfilling the mission.
Exactly.
Readiness.
Readiness. Where are my pants? And what's interesting is that this Curetex material is made fundamentally of very similar things that wool is made of. So we've reconfigured a waste product in a way that can feel just like wool, a fine wool. So, it sounds crazy, but it's innovating using new methods, which, years ago, you would just look at chicken feathers, you wouldn't know what to do. But now with these new methods and new ways to manufacture, you can produce a luxury good.
Well, the one thing I remember about chicken feathers is it didn't smell very good when you burn it.
That's right. Well, and again, it just seems like a ridiculous idea, but it turns out we have a young PhD gal who worked on advanced avionics for her PhD in aerospace and studied how effective and efficient bird flight is for long endurance aircraft. And it turns out birds have some very cool superpowers, and feathers are one of them. So, I mean, it may start out with avionics and then pivot over to a fabric and then a luxury good and then back to something else. But that's what makes this so exciting, right? Because it's something you just take for granted. You never think about. Birds are everywhere. But say what's really fascinating is it's taking something, the idea of birds. You go back to Leonardo da Vinci and the Codex of Flight and what he did. That was sort of humans dreaming of flight when it was totally impossible. New methods and materials got together, and so you've got the Wright brothers. We can show that we can fly. Then we make aluminum. Then we make carbon fiber. Now we're trying to make drones. It turns out birds would be incredibly efficient drones. You can fly all around the world for very little energy to go exactly to the right spot. So we got a lot to learn from birds, which brings us all the way back to reevaluating Leonardo da Vinci's work on birds. What can we learn? So that's what I learned from examining this work from this young PhD aerospace engineer who's looking at, so what's up with birds?
Yeah, so go back to nature.
And learn from that. It's called biomimetics. So mimicking biology and teasing out the secrets of Darwinian evolution that's produced these magnificent systems and birds and animals and things. We can learn a lot from nature. So it kind of goes in the cycle, which is a lot of fun too.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll have to look at birds differently now.
No, it's very cool. I mean, this whole thing with drones, you see what's going on in Ukraine and drones are everywhere. But
in Amazon delivering drones.
Amazon delivering. But just think about, a bird is a very efficient device. It's an animal, but it's very good on fuel. It knows how to navigate. It knows how to deal with all kinds of situations. And we're just not that smart yet. But they're a great example of what might be possible. And right now it looks like that might be something there's a lot of interest in with, parts of the government. Yeah,
well, it sounds exciting. So can't wait to see if I can get a chicken feather scarf at some point. And we'll see.
Possibly.